My name is Diane Bailey, and I am the CEO of Emerge, Natural Beauty Industry Alliance. And our mission is to do exactly what we're doing right now. Talk about industry concerns, build our network, engage, elevate, create leadership, and really create the lifestyle that we want through the industry. I have been a natural hair care specialist for over 40 years. I have loved every minute of it, right? Yeah. Right, Sally? We've been doing this since the 80s, man, yeah. Right? It has been a beautiful journey for me to be able to touch sisters and brothers and engage them with natural products and engage them with the aesthetics that I feel have more value than anything, which is our own cultural aesthetics, our African aesthetics. So that's the art that I love. We're gonna just go through this really quick. We are here because New York City has given us a gift, and that gift is the right and the protection for natural hairstyles. And it's amazing. So please applaud, please, because we have them right here today, and we're here to honor them and the work that they've done. So next. These are some of the quotes that we have. You could read them. We also are going to send you the links to all of our sponsors that are here today around this topic. Next. Of course, you've seen these horrible experiences that we've been having. Social media has brought them to light, but let me explain to you. This has been going on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And so we are so blessed to be able to be connected to each other in a way that is immediate. Next. Again, more unprofessional hairstyling, thrown out of school. The Supreme Court says, no, you don't have to hire. It's just on and on and on. And I know we all, as women of color, have had these experiences. I know I have. I remember going to a job interview, and I took out my braids, because I always had my braids, and straightened my hair, went on my interview, and got the gig, right? Had a gig for maybe 2 weeks. I said, okay, I'm going to go back to my braids. Pulled me in the office and told me, no, that's an unacceptable look. So I said, well, I have to be true to the game. I wouldn't bought me a wig, right? So I had the braids and the wig. Well, you can imagine what June, July, and August felt like. Exactly. So how long did I stay in that job? Not very long. Not very long. So it affects our economy. And as we'll speak later, it affects us spiritually, it affects us psychologically, it affects us economically. We're affected on every angle of our lives just based on the fact that our hair has this energy that people don't get. And maybe they're not supposed to get it, but at least they can respect it.
That's right.
Okay. Next. So in reading over the information I have, there's over 500 reports of natural hair discrimination in New York City in 2008. 2 reported each day. And that's what was the reported incidences. There are so many that are not reported. Next. These are all our panelists for today. I want to thank our panelists. I am so incredibly grateful, so incredibly honored that they have chosen us to bring this to light so that we can go back to our community and really engage our community in a way that is impactful, that is responsible, and that is professional, because that's the other thing. We don't want to come out and say, oh, no, we're not the homegirls. We are intelligent women of color, and we should be able to be heard in a respectful manner no matter where we go, no matter what our hair looks like. And so that's one of my passions, and that's one of the things that we have to do in this year of 2019. So these are all our panelists. I'm, again, very honored and grateful. I'm going to go one by one as they present, and we'll have that. Can we go next? These are all the brands. Thank you to the sponsors. Let's stay connected. Thank you. And we have some hashtags. We have some hashtags. While Black NYC, right? Everybody take a picture of that. My Natural Hair Rights. We have Emerge Hair Inclusion, Shea Moisture, of course, and then, of course, our CLSJ at Medgar Evers College. So these are all the hashtags that we would like you to present. These are also our Facebook pages and our Instagram. Please connect with all of them. We have to show an engagement. So if you're taking pictures, please go on Instagram, shoot the pictures. If you're doing small videos, do it, because people need to know what's happening as it's happening right now. So we're live on Facebook. Hello, Facebook, everyone. Thank you for being a part of this. Even though you couldn't be here, we are here to help you understand better and really engage with us, even though you're not here. So thank you. So my first guest, do we have the slide ready? Okay, Simone. Simone Jordan is our what's your title?
Community Commerce, Senior Director of
Community Commerce for Shea Moisture. Everybody's familiar with Shea Moisture? So can you tell us about this short video that we're going to see?
So my name is Simone Jordan, and I'm the Senior Content Director at Sundial Brands, which is a Unilever company, and we're the maker of Shea Moisture. It's really important for us to be here, one, because we love Diane, and she's our partner and master stylist of everywhere we go. She's empowering girls and women to rock their natural hair. So yes, it's an honor to be here with her. But it's as important because issues with women of color are at the forefront of everything that we do. And hopefully you see it. Part of my job is to make sure we're telling those stories, and I'm in the places where women are telling us what we need to focus on, and then we're focusing on them. And so for us, most people know Rich Lou, right, who was the founder of Shea Moisture. And for him, empowering women was the key #1 reason why he created the brand. So it was inspiring them to rock their natural hair, but also making sure that they have access, fair treatment, and doors are open for them. So he's done it even more when Shea Moisture was purchased by Unilever. He made sure the deal protected and gave money to women of color. So it's everything that we do and everywhere that we go, we're making sure that women of color, their issues, and not just hair, but holistically, how you get access, how you get into doors. That's a priority for Shea Moisture. And we know that hair discrimination is preventing us from getting into a lot of those doors, right? It's preventing access, and it should not. So we're really excited about this conversation and what New York has done to make sure that those doors are now open. And I think more importantly, as Diane said, to introduce this piece with our community partner, it's changing perceptions for young girls. It's letting them know it's okay. You can look how you are, natural and beautiful, and be able to get jobs and have opportunities. And that was really important for us. And so through community commerce, which I'm sure a lot of people may not be familiar with here, but it's our business model. And what happens is when you purchase Shea Moisture products, 10% is going back into the Community Commerce Fund, which is operated by Sophie Tucker Foundation, which is the Dennis family, their grandmother, who is the reason why we have Shea Moisture products. And so when the money comes back, it almost cycles back in. So if you women of color, us women of color, we're purchasing Shea Moisture products, then 10% is coming back, and then we're putting it back into our communities and with those who are empowering change in their communities. So one of our partners is Principal Nadia Lopez. I don't know if anybody's familiar with her. Yeah, she's amazing. I'm so excited that I got to partner with her on her Hair Fest that happened a couple of weeks ago. And it was about creating hair confidence in her girls. So I won't say too much about what that partnership meant to us. I'll let the film speak for itself. But that's how we're empowering more communities, and that's how we're empowering girls. And we know that a lot of times it starts in a school. And it's by seeing women like Nadia Lopez not only telling them they're beautiful, but also showing in her hair and in how proudly she wears her natural, her natural hair, that they're learning from her.
So just tell me a little bit more about your position.
Sure.
And just how did this process start for you?
Sure. So first of all, I want to say thanks, Diane, because we are so honored to be here and to be part of this conversation, this community. So I am a deputy commissioner at the City Commission on Human Rights. We are a local agency here in New York that's responsible for enforcing the New York City human rights law and for educating New Yorkers about their rights under that law. And just in a nutshell, I won't spend too much time talking about the law itself generally, but it's an anti-discrimination law that has protections on the basis of race, gender, age, disability, many, many other different categories across employment, housing, and public accommodations. Also bias-based profiling by law enforcement and something called discriminatory harassment that's a little bit like a local version of hate crime. But the law is really there to make sure that folks do not face discrimination in any facet of their lives. And the commission, particularly under the leadership of our current commissioner, Carmelyn Morales, is really trying to be a more vocal force, a force that's out there affirming and validating what folks are really experiencing. And so the guidance that we released in February was really aimed at doing just that. So
Can I ask?
Yeah,
was it
yeah,
released
please.
during February because it's Black History Month?
Well, yeah.
Poetic.
Well, yes,
We've been
yes.
fighting for this so long, and then it's released during Black History Month, and it's been a rough year.
Yes,
So I had to ask.
absolutely. We were glad to be able to get it out during February, and yeah, very happy that it worked out the way it did. I think we also released it on the day that was both the birthday of. And now here I am. Yes. No, I think was it. Toni Morrison and Amber's going to look it up and remind me. But in any case, it was poetic. But in any case, we decided to do the guidance because, one, I think as a commission, we really wanted to focus on anti-Black racism this year and really draw and focus some attention on the particular experiences of Black New Yorkers. We were also acknowledging the fact that we had a number of cases at the commission where folks had been employed and they had, for instance, very similar to your story, Diane, gone to an interview with, their hair styled in one way and then come in with their natural hair only to be told that's not acceptable, that's unprofessional, that's unkempt, you need to change that or you've got to go. And in some cases they were told to go. And so we had those cases, but we were also looking around and seeing some of the same cases that have been reported in the media more recently. As you were saying, there's a long history of this, but also social media has really allowed some of this to rise up and get more attention than it previously had. So taking all of that into account, we also screened Gillian Scott Ward's film Back to Natural, which I think you'll hear a little bit about in a bit. And all of those factors taken together really moved us to be clear about the way we think our law operates. So if you had asked us, we would have always said that discrimination on the basis of race that's really focused on hair, and particularly natural hair or hairstyles that are associated with Black people generally, was always protected under our law. But we wanted to make it absolutely clear to put out this guidance so that folks could then take it and advocate for themselves if they found themselves in a situation like the one we described, or so that employers would be on notice, right? So there would be no ambiguity and no thought that, like, yes, I have this policy, but it's not about your hair being Black hair. It's about just what we consider to be professional. We wanted it to be absolutely clear, and we wanted to really challenge those notions of Black hair being unprofessional, unkempt, unacceptable in the workplace. And also places of public accommodation. It's not limited to workplaces. It's also gyms, fitness clubs, bars, restaurants, those sorts of things. Schools, yes, any place where someone would tell you, you have to change your hair to be here.
Brittny, what is our rights under the bill? What are the new protections? Are they broad? Is it more narrow? What specifically do we need to know?
Yeah. So the guidance is designed to make it absolutely clear that if you are in a place of employment or a place of public accommodation and there is a policy that bans, for instance, locks, twists, braids, afros, fades, any of those styles, or if you're in a setting like that and you notice that you are being treated differently than other folks on the basis of your hair, that you absolutely should come to us and bring that to the attention of the commission and let us know so that the folks in our law enforcement bureau can investigate and pursue that claim. And then also, as I mentioned before, right, having this additional degree of clarity, being able to point to a piece of paper where it says it has examples, that folks can pull and use, and it clearly outlines that under the New York City human rights law, race discrimination includes discrimination that's based on your hairstyle or your hair texture. That we wanted to make it clear so that people could advocate for themselves rather, and we wanted to let folks know that you might be experiencing this, and you might think that this is just part of your everyday experience, something you and people in your family have experienced for generations. But we wanted people to understand that it is race discrimination under the law. Both employers and people who might be experiencing it in the workplace, people who own businesses, people who run schools, all of those sorts of things.
Response. What was your response when you first saw it? And
Thank you.
What significant impact do you think it would make for our children?
So I didn't believe it when
Okay.
it first
You were in
came out.
disbelief.
I didn't believe it because, quite frankly, you fight so hard for recognition for something, particularly when you are a black woman, right? Like, we have to fight for every single solitary advance. And so to wake up on maybe Toni Morrison's birthday, we're going to figure out whose birthday it was, to find out that a city agency had actually taken not just note of it, but then had gone to do the work of culling the cases, because there have been a number of cases recently where the Supreme Court and higher jurisdictions, or jurisdictions including the Supreme Court, have said that, no, it is okay to ban dreadlocks. It is okay to ban this. It is okay to ban that. And so to wake up and see, because it wasn't on my radar at all, and I often give that example. I work at a racial justice law center, and I always say, everyone in my office is black, and almost all of us have natural hair. So if a white attorney were to come and apply for our law center, and she was totally qualified in every other way, intellectually, she's astute, she understands racial justice, so on and so forth, and I were to look at her to interview and say, oh, you're amazing, you've got everything we're looking for, but your hair, it's just too straight. Right. And here we have an aesthetic that requires hair to grow out towards the sun. It's a spiritual thing for us. It's a black thing for us. You may not understand, but because of that, you are not qualified to work here. That is a blatant example of discrimination. And every time I would give that example at a talk, people would do what you just did. Yeah, right. They would laugh about it. But then we have to pause and realize, but black women do that every day. Like, literally every day, at every single point that we are encountering the employment process, that we are encountering an accommodations option, we are confronted with, is my hair too nappy today? Is the person who is evaluating me in this particular moment, are they going to have an issue with this texture? Did I manipulate my 4C hair enough to look like a 3A hair so that I could squeeze on through this line and get through? So when the guidance came out, I didn't believe it. I had to do, I called some friends. I was like, y'all see this? But was really surprised and grateful, because it is important that social movements are tied to spaces where the law is able to codify the rights we are fighting for. Now, we know we got things like voting rights. Like, we've gotten voting rights several times, and every time we get them, they snatch them back. So I fully expect that people will be trying to snatch us back. We got y'all. We're gonna fight for y'all and fight for us. But it is so important to marry social justice activism, racial justice activism with legislation, with regulation, so that our passion in the streets is matched with a rule that can protect us in the courtroom. And for me, one of the things as it pertains to our children, my daughter is natural, my son is a locked head, my husband, we got a whole bunch of natural hair in our household. So they've grown up seeing you. They've grown up seeing Natasha, Imani, they've grown up seeing people around them, so this is all they know. But when they go into the workplace, and if you don't live in Brooklyn, which I also call the Afro-natural and the Afro capital of the world, like if you live anywhere outside of Brooklyn, specifically outside of New York City, it is a very different reality. So for little girls and little boys to know that, okay, somewhere, and this is New York City, so we know it has to grow. There's a lot of room for growth. But for little children to know that there is a place where I am going to be protected, how I show up. So I don't have to manipulate my body. I don't have to contort myself. I don't have to make myself or my hair do anything that the universe that created me did not actually intend for it to do in order to just get in. That to me is huge. And it's also empowering because maybe you don't want to work for somebody else. And you are going to be the employer. Now you also have legs that you can stand on so that you can advocate and defend for our community even further. So I'm still a little disbelieving. But I'm very, very grateful. And I think this is what we would hope to see happen in more of our social justice movements when we're fighting explicitly for racial justice. And I always say natural hair Black women, if you are choosing to not have permed hair, to not have straightened hair, you are putting yourself in the bullseye of a social understanding, a social framework that says you are problematic, how your hair is problematic, and everything about you is radical, it's political, it's dangerous, it's blackity black. And that scares people, and it's so important for me that we are able to see that as we are pushing forward this movement and as it pertains to being unapologetically Black. If you are a Black natural hair woman, I feel like you are on the front lines. You have done what it takes to build up the muscular. You've built up your muscles enough that we are able to address social justice issues in ways that perhaps other people may not. Not saying that we got it all down pat, but we have been in the firing line in ways that others in our community may have chosen not to. No judgment. But because of that, it is imperative that we are organizing not just to advocate for our hair and for our gorgeous aesthetic, because it is all of that, but for our rights, for our ability to live. And I should not have to make economically sustainable decisions for my household based on whether or not I'm making a white person or a Black person who is not comfortable with natural hair, comfortable with my hair being straight.
What in particular, can you give us one case that really just tilted the balance scale and made you say, this is what we're going to do?
Sure. I mean, there were a number, and we can't talk about the facts of all of them,
No.
but there's one that was reported in the press, so that was some fairly striking facts. So there was a hair salon, the Upper East Side, employed a number of different staff, some of them being Black women and other women of color. And very striking comments made about people's hair, lots of staff with long hair below their shoulders. It was only the Black women who were told, you need to pull that back, you need to pull that away. Comments made, some made directly to the women themselves, but also to people who supervise them about, you need to handle that, you need to, make sure that they are not styling themselves in this way in the workplace because they are not projecting the image that we want for the salon. I think there were even comments about, this is a Upper East Side salon. This is not, and the image you're projecting is some other part of the city, right? So
Brooklyn.
Yeah. So I mean, and that case is one case, right? That happens to be very public, but one of the most not shocking, I will say, actually kind of gratifying in some sense, saddening in another about this whole process was that as soon as we put this out there, we got just a wave of people reporting back to us via social media about, I had this experience, I applied for this job, I had to change my hair in order to get it. I was harassed and stigmatized at work. So there's just tons of these stories out there. That's one of the cases that happens to be with us, but it was very clear very quickly after we released the guidance that it's a widespread experience, and obviously I'm not telling anyone
And
things they don't know.
specifically, we can't talk about that particular case, but what would be the penance if they were found guilty? What would be the penance of that?
Right. So we've worked very hard in the last few years to make the commission a venue for justice that is equivalent to going to state court or going to federal court. So at the commission, you can get up to $250,000. Well, not you, rather. So we can assess up to $250,000 in civil penalties. So those are penalties that folks would have to pay to basically as punishment essentially for engaging in a violation of the city human rights law. Individuals who bring cases, there's no cap on damages, right? So we could look at whether you experienced an economic harm, whether you experienced an emotional harm, and then order damages to be paid on that basis. And there are other things that the commission can do as well in terms of like ordering changes to policies, right? So that, the policy that's in place would have to change. Maybe there's training that would have to be required for all staff to kind of change the way people think about these things. Back pay, front pay, all sorts of different things that could be ordered.
Thank you. I have a question for the audience. So y'all get your caps on. Who of us here is currently dealing with hair discrimination? Or has dealt with it recently or in the past? Any one of us? In the past. So, like, raise your hand really high. Anybody want to share?
Test. Okay.
Get up, stand up. Stand up.
I had the same experience as you. I didn't grow up here, but I grew up in Suriname, and I remember having a job as a teenager. Before I went to the job, I had a job, but I called them like, listen, I have braids. Do I need to take them out? And they said, yes, you need to take them out. So I took them out, went with my straight hair, and then, after the job was done, I braided my hair again. So.
Okay. Next, who's next?
At the time when I started wearing braids, I worked in a Catholic hospital, and there were very few black women or men there. And I remember them saying to me, well, you can wear the braids, you're different. And so I said, yeah, I'm wearing the braids. I said, what I'm going to do? I'm going to grow out my hair and I'm going to get locks. Oh, no, you can't do that. So the punk rockers had started putting different colors, so they made up a whole law system for the hospital. No color in your hair, no blue, pink, or any of those colors, and no dreadlocks, and no more braids. And that was very hard because I realized that they had a law against it, and that was my job at the time.
Wow. One more? Anyone want to share?
Someone over here.
Oh, over here.
Hi, yes. So I am the mother of a child who has cerebral palsy. And so when he was in elementary school, I'm the one that takes care of him in the morning, and he had locks. So I'd send him to school, and I remember him coming home from school with a note saying, he has an odor, right? And I'm like, I don't know what she's talking about. So I kind of like, didn't really address it. But the notes kept coming, probably for 3 weeks. So I showed up at the school. It was really sad because it was a sister. It was actually a sister who, she had a perm, and she was kind of dodging me. So it was like the assistant principal was, there to greet me and to tell me how wonderful my child was and this, that, and the third. But I was there to address these notes that I had been receiving, and I wanted to see the teacher who had been sending these notes, and I wanted to know exactly what she was talking. Well, she was talking about his hair. And it was really sad that she associated his locks with something that was like, really smelly, even though it did not smell. I'm a master loctician. I've been doing natural hair for over 35 years, right? And so, I've been using the best products and, keeping his hair really groomed. And when I saw her, she had a perm. It was really wispy. It was in a ponytail. And, I just felt really sad for her.
So
but
sad.
I did have to address it with the school and let them know, because when they said, well, they kind of beat around the bush and they wanted to say, oh, he's wonderful and, he's picking up a lot of, what we're putting out and this, that, and the third. Well, what about these notes? Right. And finally, I guess she couldn't avoid, there was nowhere for her to hide. She says, well, it's his hair.
Okay.
I said, what about his hair? Okay, let's talk about that. What about his hair? And she was like, oh, well, because, it's locked, it's not combed. Wow. His hair is sweet.
Wow. Yes.
Just like the rest of him.
Thank
so
you.
it was
Thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
We've
I had
all,
to educate them.
If we've lived in this country, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's in the disguise of another sister.
Yeah.
Because she's already been conditioned to understand and believe that this is unprofessional, Lurie. Tell me, is natural hair unprofessional?
Great question. Natural hair is professional. It is professional as the black woman who's wearing it, or the black man who is wearing it, or the gender nonconforming person who is wearing it. And one of the things we always have to remember is if I were white and my hair were untouched, it would fall straight. Or maybe curly, because there's variety there. If I am black and my hair is untouched, it falls out, right? Like it grows out. If I have white hair or Caucasian hair and I pull it into a ponytail, it's a ponytail because it's going to fall over to the side. If I do the same thing with my hair, it's going to be an Afro puff because it grows up. And just like an Afro puff is all hair pulled into a ponytail, and a ponytail is unnatural hair or a non-our hair pulled into the same thing, these are the exact same hairstyles. And sometimes I'll put images of a young white girl up with a ponytail, and then I'll flash a young black girl up with an Afro puff. What is the difference? The only difference is that one texture grows up, the other's texture grows down. If we are wearing our hair out straight and our moms just brushed it down, and mine rises into an afro by the end of the afternoon and yours slips down into a straight hairstyle, it's the exact same hairstyle, the texture is different. Professionalism is often a code word for whiteness. How closely are we approximating whiteness and the white European facial or physical aesthetic when we are presenting? And that can
Say that again.
It is.
Say that again.
Which part? If it's professional, it's really a question for how closely are you approximating whiteness, right? And we know that the closer we get to whiteness in a society that has a racial hierarchy where the whiteness is supreme and the blackness is not, we know that the closer you approximate that, which is what that teacher is doing, right? So in that teacher's mind, she's not just concerned about the son, but she's thinking, this child has already got some disadvantages. Why add this other one to it, right? And which can often be misplaced, but it is also a protective measure. Some of the folks that I had experienced discrimination with when I was in corporate law were other black folk in the law firm. Some elder black women who had been there for decades who would pull me to the side and say, "Now, baby, we love having you here, all you young, new black attorneys, but you ain't gonna go too far with your hair doing all that." And that was a sign of love. They weren't being critical. It's not that they were so riddled with self-hate that they were just trying to tear a sister down. They were trying to protect me from what they knew was coming. And so I had to let them know, well, I'm not trying to be partners with these people. This is not where I see myself ending, but I had to let them know that I have chosen a professional path that says wherever I go, this is how I'm gonna show up. And if it's a problem for you, I need to know that at the interview stage, because it's a waste of my time, it's a waste of your time. It's not me, it's you. And so I need to be able to move on effectively and not cast my pearls before swine, not waste my time trying to elevate into this space, because if you can't get to my brilliance because you're blocked by my hair, then my brilliance will never be able to thrive in this space. And so having access to a set of regulations that are going to allow me to walk that out is very important. But we have to be clear that it is important for that teacher to know that for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, since African people have been African people, wasn't nobody looking for no magical juice or berry or like root to make our hair straight and our skin lighter. That did not happen until slavery and until a social system that would give out benefits and take away benefits based on skin color and hair texture were created. So I get it. I understand why we are in this way. I understand why anti-Blackness is what it is. That's why we need legislation and regulations that are going to allow us to live our truth despite the fact that other people are still living in the slave age.
Thank you so much. So well said. So Brittny, I have one last question for you. As an employee, what steps can they take when they feel discrimination? How do we protect ourselves from hair discrimination in the workplace?
Right. So I would advise a couple things. If you feel like you are experiencing this form of discrimination or any form of discrimination, I would start by documenting. But if you want to, if you're not certain what you're experiencing, you want to take some action, though, you want to get some advice, you could certainly call the commission. You can call 311 and use the word human rights or discrimination. You can also call us directly at 718-722-3131, 718-722-3131, and that's the line for our info line, and that will help get you routed to an attorney who can do some intake. If you are experiencing something, you're not certain you want to file a complaint, you're not certain how far you want to go yourself, but you want to give us that information so that perhaps we can investigate or we can take some action. You don't have to contact us and leave your name. You can give us information anonymously, make an anonymous report. If you've seen something, if you just want to let us know, but you're not necessarily sure that you want to go forward with a complaint, that's always an option as well.
Thank you. And one last question, Lurie. What steps do we need to take to diminish hair discrimination in our industry, our community, and for parents of the next generation?
So I think, well, one, that's a really good question, because we have to be clear that part of the success of slavery and the successful perpetuation of white supremacy is that we were convinced to believe it. Right? And so we have to do the hard, and this is internal work. There's no legislation, Martin Luther King has this quote, there's no emancipation, no Jacksonian or Lincolnian proclamation that will do for us what we have to be able to do for ourselves. That's a paraphrase, he didn't say those exact words, but that's what he meant. And what he was talking about was the fact that the laws are gonna be the laws, but until Black people do the hard work of learning to love ourselves, more than we were taught to hate ourselves, right? Then we are going to fundamentally always be behind the 8 ball. And so for parents, I have a 12-year-old, and a 5-year-old, I have nieces and nephews all across the country. And again, the experience of the folks who are living here in Brooklyn, I keep saying like we're in Brooklyn, in New York City, is very different when you leave this state. And so if I am a mom in Ohio, if I am a mom in Minnesota, my child is going to have, she's not going to have a Diane Bailey necessarily. She's not going to have a Maine Moves media necessarily. And so we have to, as parents, really begin being the mama bears and the activists that we need to be for our children, whether you agree with it or not, right? You may not like the hairstyle, you may still be in a perm, but you're gonna fight for your child or for your baby to show up in the body that God gave them, because sometimes we're willing to do for our children what we're not willing to do for ourselves. And so we have to begin thinking, if you're in one of those spaces that doesn't have this regulation, what types of local level activism can you be engaged in that's going to bring this front and center? What city council meetings do you need to be attending? What school board meetings do you need to be attending? Does your school have a policy that is discriminatory as applied against Black children? Who are you going to link up with in your parent group? And how are you going to raise the holy hell that you need to raise in order to make sure that you get this type of legislation, that you can change the school regulations and the discriminatory grooming policies as they are applied to your community? We have to be clear that anti-Blackness was taught, and it can be untaught. But we have to, just like if I spend 5 years studying, if I spend 3 years in law school and I never once take a class in racial justice, then I'm not going to be very effective at advocating from a racial justice perspective. So I have to go out and seek out the material. I need to join groups like Emerge NBIA, which is not just a New York-based entity. I need to be connecting with other people who are already having this conversation. I need to be watching documentaries like Back to Natural. I need to be doing these types of things, visiting websites like going-natural.com. Y'all see how I'm dropping these names, right? Because it's important that we're clear that there is an industry of support that is here for us. But if you are not in a space that has this type of protection, you can be. People had to fight for this. This didn't just happen because lovely Brittny and Amber got to the commission. People had to fight for this. And so you have the power to attend the city council meetings, to attend your assembly, your Senate meetings, to demand hearings, to demand that you are going to put Blackness front and center in any legislation. And if anybody wants your vote, what are you doing to protect my ability to get work without having to change my body? What are you doing to make sure that my child can go to school and actually get a culturally responsive education without having to battle teachers who have been so misinformed that they are allowed to educate from an anti-Black pedagogical stance? How are we going to do that? Not just me, myself, but who am I going to link with in my community that is also doing it? This is community organizing 101. And so when we are Black people, we are literally, my husband always says, you are a walking racial justice issue. Whether you want to be or not, you are a walking racial justice issue. So if it's our hair, if it's our complexion, whatever it is, we have to center it. And by centering it, I mean everyone, so now we see people asking all the presidential candidates where they stand on reparations. People are fighting for that. People are advocating for that. And so now if you want the vote, you have to have an educated answer about that. Start posing the question. So when candidates come by for district leader, or when they come by for whatever it is, the positions that they're fighting for, hi, have you heard about the new legislation that they've passed in New York City? Where do you stand on the way that racial bias is embodied in anti-Black hair discrimination? What is your stance. What is your proposal? Oh, you don't have one? Here's mine. And here's what we want you to do. And here's what you're going to have to do if you want our vote. So centering this as a political issue, as an issue that is really a fundamental part of our lives. Black women go to therapy because of the issues and the trauma that we experience around our hair. How dare we not think that it is worth fighting for as much as any other right that we are supposed to have as Black people? And y'all know I believe in fighting unapologetically for us to be as Black as we need to be in every single space. And so if we have to take cultural authority at work, some of us ain't gonna be in a space where we're gonna have defense, and some of us might get fired. Some of us might not be, and let's just be honest, like we're talking about avant-garde. This is one small jurisdiction, a powerful one, but this is one small jurisdiction. Some of us are going to have to make sacrifices. Some of us are going to be a part of those court cases that will travel up through other jurisdictions where courts are going to say, sorry, no, that we don't agree with what they did in New York. That's okay. This is about creating community, and if you're not in a position where that's okay, don't let that be your fight. That's another conversation. But this is about really centering who we are and being committed to the fact that we deserve to take up our fair share of the sun, the air, and the moon, and we don't have to apologize about that to anybody.
Woo! Yes! Yes. Questions, please.
I'm going to start because I have the microphone. Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Natasha from Main Moves Media. If you heard, she dropped the name, just in case you were like, who that? So I have a question about what if you are working at a huge company and you're afraid, okay? So not only do you have the inkling that it might be a problem to go natural, that you have actually heard them say, that's not a good idea. What is your recourse now that there's this guidance here? There are a lot of people who are afraid, and so like you said, everybody's not going to be in the front lines. Everybody's not going to go to the Supreme Court. But me being in the natural hair community for so long and working with a lot of women, I've heard this story so many times. And I'm just wondering, now with this protection, what do they do? Do they actually go to their employer and say, I have protection now. You can't say that to me. So, or like, how do you go about I would do that, but how do you suggest that someone who works at a major corporation who feels that they cannot or they will lose their job because they've actually been told that? Should they have a secret recording going on? Like, what's the strategy that they should use now?
I think part of our hope with the guidance is that with the power of the commission behind it, right, the individual doesn't have to go and say, like, I want this for myself. You can have that conversation in the frame of like, oh, you know what, this is now something that the city of New York has said is unlawful, right? And so I think we hope that that empowers people to go and approach their employer, go to HR and say, hey, have you seen this? You may not be aware, but this is actually race-based discrimination. Now, we also understand that that's risky for some folks, right? Even understanding that you have the protection under the law, right? There is stuff to weigh and stuff to balance. So I would say that if you are comfortable giving us a call, maybe leaving your information anonymously, letting us know that there is something that needs to be investigated at a particular employer and letting us do the work from there could be another option. But there's a lot that folks have to weigh, so I totally hear that point.
I'm wondering, how would they prove that they're actually been discriminated against? That's
so when we encourage people to reach out to us, we ask them don't feel like you need to take on all of the, like, I have to have all the proof here and all the dots, lined up. Like, come to us, let us figure that out. It is often helpful to, like, if there's an email that went around, you might want to save that email. You might want to document things that people have said to you so that you can have some recollection. But don't feel like you need to have the entire case buttoned up before you come to us. Come to us and let us help you figure that out.
Anybody have a question?
Okay.
So I have a very interesting question. Hi, my name is Kim Sue of Kim Sue Hair Art. It's such an honor for this conversation. You guys have no idea how happy I am that we're having this conversation. Over the years, I've spoken to so many clients about discrimination. So many of them have lost jobs. So many of them have quit because they will not forego their natural hair, their locks, their afro for a position. Now I have a lot of military clients, and they are experiencing it in a level I could not even fathom. What steps can they take, or what protection is there for them?
Yes. So, I mean, I think in the military changed some of its policies. I don't know like which services it applies to. There might be some distinctions there, but they did recently change some of their policies around natural hair and hairstyles in order to make them more inclusive and to prevent some of this discrimination from happening. So I'd encourage folks to try to dig a little bit deeper and see what protections they do have there. If they are also in New York City, then our law may also apply at another level of protection. But as Lurie mentioned, right, we're one jurisdiction, and we're hoping that our model encourages other folks to do the same. And certainly, I think there are principles in our guidance that might be helpful to folks in other settings, even if they're not within New York, to help make the argument. But I don't know if you have other thoughts about how people could advocate for themselves.
I think that, so we have to recognize the time that we're in. Right, let us be clear, this is MAGA America, right? We are seeing a return of some things that I read about as a Gen X child of the 80s. It's like, ooh, what would it have been like in the 60s when people were like openly racist? And well, now we know. We're seeing that come back. We didn't, just a taste, but we're seeing that come back. So we have to be clear that, and this is something some of you have heard me say before, integration to work successfully requires two things. Number one, a government that is willing to enforce anti-racism laws, like this legislation, right? But it also requires a white populace or a privileged populace that is willing to keep their racism quiet and at home. We really don't have either of those two things nationwide. Broadly speaking, New York City has got this beautiful little hiccup, this little bubble of protection, Afro capital of the world. But we don't have that in most places. So when people are talking about advocating for themselves, you got to recognize what time we are in. If you are filing an EEOC, an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission complaint about discrimination at your job, that is likely going to go up the chain to what was Jeff Sessions, and now we have a new Attorney General, Barr, and it is going to be reviewed by an administration that is hostile to racial protections, and that is hostile to Black people, and is hostile to anyone who is not fully thought of in the Make America Great Again space. So, had this regulation been implemented under the Obama administration, we might have a different national approach. But we are not under that administration anymore, and we are now in a space where people have to be very clear. The protections that we have largely relied upon nationwide as it comes to limiting discrimination, the impact of discrimination on our lives, particularly in the workplace, are largely on shaky ground. So when you're talking about advocating for yourself, be clear what you are risking. Can you afford to risk this on this particular? I've told people before, if you are not comfortable with natural hair, please don't interview with natural hair. This is not the hill to die on. This is not the time to die on your sword. This ain't it. Get the job. You have to eat. And if you're not comfortable, you are going to project, I am not comfortable with my hair. And everyone around you that has a scintilla of antenna up is going to be like, something ain't right. I think it's the hair. I don't really know, but something ain't right. So you have to be clear about what time it is. You have to do an assessment. Are there rules on the books that can protect me? Can I get a job someplace else if this doesn't work out for me? And those are real questions, because we are not in a space right now where people have time to play around. And this is a time where we really, big picture thinking, have to be clear that this is why it probably wasn't a good idea to give up all Black-owned businesses for the promise of integration. We probably should rethink that now. We should approach that differently. So those of you who are in the industry, who are the leaders in maintaining and growing profitable Black-owned businesses, you are really the avant-garde, because you are one of the few places that was like, some about this whole promise of integration, some about ain't nobody gonna know how to two-strand twist like I do. So, we have to be clear that there needs to be some real, and this is bigger picture, because if you're in the moment, you have a different, you're looking at forest and trees, I'm looking at the forest big picture now. We have to be clear that Black professionals have got to start thinking about business ownership, so that we don't have to navigate spaces that are openly hostile to us. So I don't want my children interviewing in spaces where they need a regulation like this. I want them to have the option of going to a Black middle school, a high school, a college, and then going to interview and work for someone like yourselves who is going to be an architect, who's going to be a business owner of some sort, so that they don't have to navigate the anti-Blackness of the rest of the world, the way our Jewish brothers and sisters can do, the way our Korean brothers, the way every other healthy minority group can do. So we got to recognize what time it is. You need to do a serious assessment. Is it safe for me to advocate for me to wear an afro in a space where I am one Black person in a town of 5,000? Probably not. You should hashtag get out. But that's another thing. We just got to be clear about where we're at in the time that we're in, and then move forward accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you so much.